Producer Joe here from the Working Fans Podcast. And at the Working Fans Podcast, this is just a podcast that three lifelong fans created to have a place to talk comedy and pro wrestling. Now, our comedy podcast releases every Tuesday, while our wrestling podcast releases every Thursday. We release bonus episodes under the moniker Working Fans Presents every now and then. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, any major podcast provider. The important thing is just please like, rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to us. Now, we have started a new thing. We are now on Amazon and Audible. So those episodes release every Monday. And that's kind of going through the archives and just releasing our old episodes in a new area. So if you want to live through the process with us again, take that journey with us again, you can find us over on Amazon and Audible. Now, if you can't get enough of us in the audio form, check out our YouTube. It's youtube.com/C/Working Fans Wrestling Pod, or just search Working Fans Podcast on YouTube. We have the whole archive is up there. And if you listen to the Working Fans Podcast, you are more than familiar with the 531. That is our signature segment where we take your top 5 list on a particular subject, vote it down to a top 3, and then debate it down to a top 1. Now, guys, if you want to hear 3 guys talk shit about comedy, wrestling, life, anything, you will enjoy the Working Fans Podcast. Fans, welcome back for the 2-year anniversary episode of the Working Fans Podcast, otherwise known as episode 113. Dave, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. 2 friggin' years. Oh no, it's pretty fun, man. I'm excited. I'm sure you got questions. I know that's how we're gonna do this segment, but fuck it, I'm gonna talk for a minute. 113. All right, now when you say 113, that's just the straight up wrestling episodes.
That's just the straight up wrestling episodes. That's not the 40 some live episodes. What are we up to, like 30 episodes on the comedy cast?
Yeah, and then we're in the
combat cast is in like the
teens right now,
mid-teens, so it's prime Jerry Lawler territory.
Shout out to the king of wrestling, Jerry.
Shout out to the king. I'd say that's us at this point. I mean, we talk a big game, but
don't back it up. No, just kidding.
But one out of three doesn't, but we'll get to that later. But I wanted to do something a little different for the 2-year anniversary. Over the past couple of years, and since COVID's really kicked in, you've become like our main interviewer. You get the interviews. I'll throw you questions every now and then, but you really handle the questions. And I wanted, every time we hit like a year-end episode or we hit a landmark episode, we kind of talk a little bit about the podcast, but fuck it. Today I'm going to interview you about it.
Yeah, baby.
So the first question I got to hit you with is, since we started, how has the podcast changed for you?
Oh man, it's ups and downs, right? So first, it's just an exciting project to do. Can we get this off the ground? Can we do this? And then speaking of interviews, then it's like you start doing different things and you interview talent. It's like, can we get this guy or this girl? And then you're surprised. You're surprised at some of the people you can get, right? It's like, oh, holy shit. Al Snow's willing to do this interview, and then it's interesting, right? Because like anything, you start to get your challenges, you get your lulls, and, it's not going to take off right away for you. And you have to still keep the rest of your life going, whether it's work or business and personal. And so it's like you have this thing you love, but you can't donate all your time to it. And so therefore it just becomes, it's not, for me personally, it's never become a thing where it's I don't want to do it, but it becomes challenging. Do I want to do it this morning? Do I want to do it the next day? And it's just trying to balance everything. And so for me, to answer your question, I guess it's changed my life and it's been a little more hectic, but it's also still, it's a very rewarding thing. And to people who, don't do things like this sometimes, it's also a great conversation starter to tell them, like, oh, I do a podcast. Oh, what's it about? Pro wrestling. Usually they're going to look at you a little strange.
I was going to say, sometimes that's where the conversation stops. Like, I've had to start going, oh, well, we do comedy on Tuesdays, pro wrestling on Thursdays, MMA on Saturdays.
Right. And we haven't done the comedy one consistently now because it just became so much work to do everything and balance everything. But it's funny because
I'd say that's our most, like, that's going to get the most broad appeal.
Yeah, potentially. I think we look at our numbers too. They have spikes at different times. But yeah, I would think it's interesting though. We've talked about this. We're talking about potentially putting on a comedy show too. And ask me this question next year, how this thing's changed my life, right? After we put on a show or something potentially.
Well, actually, I just kind of wanted to find out how the podcast itself has changed. It's definitely changed our life, and we'll get into that a little later because I have questions about kind of what skills we've developed. But remember when this thing started, we had, we wanted to do an intro. Then we were going to do, what was it? A news segment. And then it was going to be the interview. I think the 531 was the first thing we created special for this to try and stand out. And it's definitely been like a good conversation piece because it gets us debating top 5 list.
Mm-hmm.
Because I came up with it because everybody does either a top 5, top 3, or a top 1. It's interesting giving us your top 5, seeing what ones are in common, and then kind of voting it down. And there's been a couple times like Kane winning the best masked wrestler that I heard that. And I'm like, of all the masked wrestlers, that's who we ended up with.
Goddamn right. Shout out to Glenn Jacobs, mayor of Knoxville, Tennessee, baby. Woo! You did it again.
Now, there's a lot of stuff we forget as the podcast goes on, like a lot of 531 lists. We're like, did we do that yet?
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think are the moments that stand out the most to you? Either guests, laughs we've had, or God, that comedy trip we took with AJ, which I think really got the comedy bug in us and kind of inspired us, besides the talk with Dame, to want to do the live shows.
Yeah, that was a big part of it too. Interesting. Like, what's
for me? Like, I'll tell you what I think about most. It's kind of the moments like when you and me are bullshitting when we're setting up and we're just laughing and we're saying things that will never make air.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's just, I don't want to give such a broad answer, but it's just those experiences, right? For me, that's a lot of fun too. I guess what's interesting to me too is just watching patterns and trends of like when we take off and when we don't, and what episodes get the most attention that you're surprised about versus other ones. And I
know we get these guests that we thought would bring people in. They get a few listens, nothing wild, but then it's the random 531 that people are like, oh, I love that episode.
Yeah, right. And so that's always interesting what attracts people. I love, like, it's funny that stuff you're talking about, like the camaraderie I think we developed. I'm going around this a little bit different way because it's like, it's two things for me because I am the guy that does most of the interviews, right? So I've had a lot more experience talking to people and meeting different people. And on that front, I think I have a little more broader experiences on that end. But, me and you developed a real friendship through this podcast, right? Like we were guys that kind of knew each other, had similar friends, and we got along. And after this, it's like, nah, this is my boy now. Like,
Oh yeah, we are locked in. Like, and you'll see it a lot in our 5-3-1s. The list will be similar. There'll be times where I'm waiting to wrap up a segment or introduce the next one, and then that's the next question you ask.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely a part of working together.
Yeah.
And since the pandemic has pushed kind of AJ away from us, it's forced us to become kind of like one team.
And I don't know if AJ's going to listen to this or not, but let's just throw that out there real quick too. Like, we're in the process. Hopefully, AJ is going to be more involved in the podcast. We certainly hope so, and so we're just kind of working through that right now too, because I think at the end of the day, he knows he's not exactly been here all the time, and so if you hear this, AJ, we know. But I'm pulling for you, buddy. Like,
it's one of those things we do our best to reach out and include him in things, but
it's got to go both ways.
Yeah, part of the things when you're in a team, like me and Dave know we can count on each other. Like if I'm not going to get something done, I'll throw it to him, and I know he'll at least work on it to try and get it done. And if not, I'll get it done when I get home. There is some give and take, and with AJ, it's kind of like catching a shooting star. We get him when we can. He's on fire when he's here.
Yeah.
But it's just getting him in for that time.
The consistency.
Yeah, part of it is communication on our part. But like when you're trying to get a podcast on the air the same time every week, sometimes it is last minute recording and it's got to go up, or it's just the little things that you don't think about in a podcast, because most people just listen to them and don't have to produce them.
I think COVID, I might have said this in other episodes too, but big thing about COVID too for me was like, I didn't want this to die. I didn't want to miss an episode. And so it became apparent that me and you might not be able to meet every week. And so I just immediately did what I could to start tracking down interviews around that time. And there was nothing else going on. I didn't have anything going on in my personal life really at that point. Just work. But work was like, you go, like, it wasn't like you were doing anything extra. I was just going to those stores and trying to get home because you didn't know what was really out there, and you didn't want to be out there any more than you really had to. So it just became an issue of like, all right, what am I going to do in this meantime? Well, let me start tracking down interviews. Let me start doing this. I'll send them off to Joe. And that just kind of became my thing. And I'm not saying that, like, if anyone hears this, like, that's not even, like, bragging. I don't know what that is. Maybe that's just because you love something. Like, it's just an instinct. Like, okay, I don't want this to die. What do we got to do? And immediately it just takes over. Okay, I want to do this. I want to do that, and you just take the effort and the work to put it in and you do it.
I will say that's one of the things since we started this podcast was making sustainable ideas. We didn't want to do a podcast that just sat out there with 5 episodes.
Right.
And I mean, I'd say maybe not every week we're like really into it. Like, I mean, we do it and we give it our all, but there's some weeks where I feel personally for me, it's just about phoning it in. And I mean, those are on busier weeks because obviously you and me both have day jobs. They take up a lot of our time, especially around summer and holidays. And then there's some days where it's like, we got to get a segment out. Let's just get this going.
Right. Consistency. Got to put something out there. Which is,
now, Dave, let me hit you with another question. What do you think have been our bigger successes?
Well, I mean, getting a live show, getting courted by a network and then going to another network. That has been a really cool experience. Obviously, we could just say, "Oh, I got to interview Al Snow," or "We got to interview Nikita Koloff," and
Ricky Morton, the Von Erich.
Right. That all was great stuff too. But let's put a little different route on this too. 2 things. One, the commentary gig, which we may still be doing. It's hit or miss every day.
Yeah, there's been some issues with that. I think we're looking at footage coming at us soon.
But what's great about that, to segue with that too. Okay, Mike Caldwell, if he listens to this, right? Guy's out in Texas, and he became a fan of us, and we've met him, and we've talked about, wrestling with him. We had him on the show, and then, like getting asked to do commentary. And suddenly now, okay. And, those guys are based out of Florida. So for me, like one of the great accomplishments for us is that we're getting people not just from our home state that have taken an interest in us and they want to do business with us or they want to contribute. That's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah, and just based off of a joke we made a guy laugh, and he's like, you know what? Let's see if these guys can do commentary. Yeah. And it's like, all right. I mean, shit, we're not even the comedians, and we're winning them over with laughs.
You know what? We're not Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone, but we'll be happy to attempt to do what they do on any kind of level. Like, it's pretty cool. It's fucking cool.
And we definitely have our own style. Like, I know we've been asked a couple times, is one of you guys going to turn heel on commentary? And it's like, we don't really think about it like that. It's more just calling the action in front of us and
I feel
trying to do it in the best way possible.
I feel like you do a very realistic approach. Maybe blur kayfabe a little times, but you add your comedy to it too. And I think it's good. And I think for the most part, try to call it as realistically as like a sport as I can think of, and just trying to like, okay, why would this happen? And, doesn't always work out perfectly, but that's, I think, our mindset a lot of times when we get in there.
Oh God, like that one match where the dude was twisting his nipple and it's like, all right, how are we going to make this work?
Forgot about that.
Now to kind of piggyback on that last question, what do you think have been some of our biggest failures? Aside from communication, which I'm sure AJ would chirp up with immediately. And I mean, that's not to say that we don't see it, because privately behind the scenes, when we've talked about the whole AJ situation, we really have gone over, did we really just not say enough?
Yeah, it's part of it. Communication is always a part of it. Also, just balancing our time and just
in a comfortable way, because we balance it, but it's like there's peaks and valleys. Like there's times where I'll edit from when I get home from work to when I go to sleep, and then I wake up the next morning and do it for like another hour just to get it out. Yeah. So things like that, the time balance could be better.
Organizing a schedule and a time just to try to get things done, but also you still have to be laxed a little bit, because especially if you're going for interviews, you can't just, if you want to get them, a lot of times you can't be like, we're available this time, this day, buddy. You don't want to do it? Fine, we won't do it. See you later, sister. It's like, no, what works for you? What can we do? Okay, let's try that. Let's try to do that,
And it's all been a part of that networking too. The more open you are for them.
And I would say that too. Actually, you kind of hit on the head just saying the word networking. Even though I know we've done some success networking, I would also say that that's where we fail a little bit the most too. And that's where we need to improve. We've had success with it, but I think we could all do a little better. We could all hang out in the comments a little bit and all, talk to people and develop relationships a little more. It's not the easiest thing to do online.
No, COVID has hurt a lot of it. Like just this past weekend, I went to the GCW show in New York, and I was actually able to give a shirt to Minoru Suzuki, which to me, that was a major thing to happen. But that's been one thing that AJ has been pushing a lot more, is getting out to shows and being able to do that.
And to be fair too, the thing we talk about AJ is like his execution. But he's a good idea guy. Like AJ is a great, like he said it before he went on vacation recently too. He's got a ton of ideas. It's just reeling him in,
just making them happen,
getting him focused. Yeah. So we'll see how that goes on. Man, when AJ listens, if he listens to this, he's going to be like, "What the fuck?" Like, dude, we talked to you about this, so this ain't blindsiding you.
Like, we wanted this to be an episode about us and the podcast. Like, how has the podcast grown with us? How have we grown with the podcast? And anybody that listens knows there are only two voices on it most week. Even Dame brought it up. I thought there were three.
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, one thing I'll say about me and Joe is we're very honest. We keep it real. Keeping it real may go wrong.
I would say that's been one of the bigger things, like when we get on the mic and like when we're on camera, I think we feel a certain obligation to our audience to not bullshit them. Maybe it's because we get bullshitted so much privately that when we get out there, we want to share with you guys what's going on, what our honest thoughts are.
And I'll say this too about AJ. I have to get back to him, but like he's used to putting on a show. He's used to being a character. He's used to going all out, and I think he prefers that. And I don't know if being real and being honest is something that's that. I don't want to necessarily say honest. Being real is something that's that comfortable for him. I think he's more comfortable being a character. I think that's where he fits in a little bit more. Whereas me and you, I don't think we know any other way than this to be genuine. Now, I can be a bit of a character, but that's just who I am. Joe will tell you 24/7.
Yeah, I think we turn it up a little bit because obviously producer Joe, the man they call Dave, not our given names necessarily. And we do play it up while we're on here, but we try and keep it as real as possible.
Yeah. It's pretty, it's not too far off.
Now, that's obviously one of our bigger strengths, but what do you think we've noticed have been our strengths while coming along in this podcast?
For me personally, what I've learned is that I'm pretty good at just talking to people, I think. You know what I mean? Like, I'm really good at just, like, having these conversations, but I'm not organized. So it kind of makes me wonder if I had a little more structure or if I could maybe even excel it. But I'm also, I guess that's part of the charm sometimes, too, is having a good casual conversation with people. You know?
Yeah, and you can, as the interview grows, you can really mold with it because I've seen you bonded a little bit with Soup Man.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was Kayla, you brought out some like little bits just relating to her and talking.
Right, she started talking about like her autism and stuff like that. And both had autism actually, so interesting. And then there's stuff like even that surprises you, like recent guest here, Brandino, where he talked about his problems with kidneys, and that led to some other conversation. And then we had this interesting conversation where we were talking about, where I've brought up countless times, but like wrestling is a lot like politics, and like it's interesting to get that feedback from this guy. You can see like he kind of got excited in that moment too. He's like, "Oh hell yeah!"
Yeah, because it's just the basic elements of winning over a crowd and talking to them that is really at the heart of it. Now,
Jim Ross always says, "Sound bites, baby, sound bites."
I think one of our bigger strengths has been getting guests. Like when we thought David Starr was above us, we got him. Ricky Morton, we got. Dr. Tom, we got. Dan St. Germain, a recent guest, one of the hosts of Wrestle Roast. That was one where I'm like, God, if we could get this guy, we made it. And think how many times we thought that. Like when we got referee Doug Markham, that was like, oh shit, we got a ref. That was our
ref from MLW.
Was that our second interview? Because first was Bob Cook. I had never heard of Bob Cook. And now that guy entertains me on Facebook. I've gone back and watched some of his older stuff, and I'm like, wow, this guy does have one of the better punches.
He does. Yeah, he really does. Yeah,
and then, God, we got Richard Holiday, Al Snow. The list just keeps going on and on. We got Pat Tanaka. We got, who is it?
AWA.
Who's that guy we got for about 5 minutes before he had Pat Rose. Pat Rose.
I had to go take care of his kid. Pat, you out there, baby? We're still waiting for that.
And it's follow-up. We've gotten so many interviews.
Alex Zane, check your DMs, kid.
Oh God, the Alex Zane, Casey Lennox were a couple interviews we missed that we were like, God, if we could get them.
Sid. Sid's been on there. Oh man, Doug Gilbert, where you at, buddy? Hey. And also too, I mean, we have not talked about this a lot, but we'll bring it up a little bit. The PW Insider debacle. All right. We learned something about that. Okay.
That was that was what, a lesson in how to market ourselves?
Yeah, how not to. And it's like, I don't want to look,
And what
problem
we
with this
trust
is
AJ with a little bit.
that's the other thing too, and AJ hears this too. Like that was the interesting thing. That's why when I told AJ, and we talked about it recently, like if we do something with these comedy clubs, I want to be involved in. One of it, I want to actually learn, and two, I just kind of want to be there to know every little detail because I don't know if every detail was shared with us about that. And it's like we thought we were just doing what people do, pay for this advertisement and getting all these great views. Well, no, not necessarily. One, some of this might not have been on the up and up, but we don't know that for sure because again, we weren't in the room and we weren't in the email process. But two, the views we were getting weren't exactly substantial views. They were misguided. They were a lot of what you would call bots and clicks from India. And then we used another service recently too, Spritzer, I want to say. Sprizzy, thank you. And check the reviews. They appear to be up and up. But a similar thing, like you're paying for these things and you're getting it doesn't feel like founded views. You're not getting like real people interacting with you. So,
and that was one thing I pushed heavy from the beginning where there was talk about like buying views to get our things up. And I'm like, I'm not really comfortable with that because if we have to go represent ourselves in the real world,
right.
No matter how good or bad the numbers are, that's what we've earned on our own. And to artificially inflate it gives us a different look. And
well, not to be so naive, but like I didn't know like what was considered buying views. And now I've kind of got a little more better idea of that. Like sometimes because they sell themselves, not even this PW Insider, but this company, Sprizzy, it's like they sell yourself as promotion. They sell yourself, but it is, I guess, to a point. But
we got more genuine kind of views from them, I believe. But even at that, it's like you're paying money to pump your stuff up. It's almost like why not get good enough content out there to bring them in? And that's been one of the tougher things I think for us is to sometimes find what's really going to pull the average viewer in.
I will say this. It was kind of cool being on a wrestling website, seeing our interviews and links to our stuff there from that point of view. It didn't necessarily translate into what we were hoping it would. But, you know,
for that fact, neither did that Impact partnership that we were trying to get in with Ross Foreman.
I still get emails from him, but usually it's just for about events, and he sends it to the my personal email account that we started with. That I was trying to get him to send it to the working man. So, and that's some miscommunication too. And we're not on Ross's radar, to be fair. And why should we be? So it was kind of a shout out. I've communicated with this man on phone. We actually were able to have phone calls and talk to each other a little bit. But it was just more.
A lot of what we do is kind of learning as we go. So,
right. You know, and maybe that's part of it too, where maybe if I was able to develop a relationship with Ross in just those few minutes, you know, but it was learning about that, learning what Ross was looking for. And Ross kind of set us on a path too, to help us out in some ways. In some ways, like we had to kind of learn our own what not to do, but he got us in the right direction, at least, you know, to like learn some more stuff. So,
yeah. Now, obviously, coming off our greatest strengths, what do you think our biggest weaknesses are?
Again, I'll go back to, I think we already kind of addressed the communication and just developing those relationships. We developed relationships, but I feel like it's always something we could improve on. Man, I'd like to say it's interesting, right? We're dedicated, but
dedicated to a point.
Right. We're not 18 years old and like we're living at home and we don't have to worry about where our next like paychecks coming in. Like, I have a mortgage and I have bills and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, I can't just quit what I'm doing. So, and I own my own business as we talk about, and I have to like shout out to Dan Moff giving me that love for that bread. But, like, it's like, it can't just be like, I can't just quit everything tomorrow and just 100% focus on this. Some people can. God bless them. I need to know there's some kind of substantial security at the end of the rainbow a little bit. But at the end of the day too, I'll be damned if I just want to give this up too. Like I want to do it. I get excited about doing it. And there are times, and things are at a pretty good spot in my life right now. And I'll still think, you know what, though? We could get more. And I want to do more with this podcast. And that's going to be a big part of it.
Yeah, this has been our creative output for a while. And
1,000%.
so what goals do you see for us in the next 2 years?
Next 2 years. Man, I hope that obviously I hope we grow numbers, of course, always. But I think the bigger and maybe the more realistic thing and the more exciting thing too is that I hope this spawns off into other adventures too. I hope we do more commentary gigs. I see that as a potential, and I hope for that. I hope we put on this comedy show. And I don't know if a comedy show is going to return to a weekly format, but I think we're going to still do comedy stuff. And I don't know where we're going to, who knows where, but I think Chevy he's been a real nice surprise. And not that I was shocked that Chevy would do a good job, but it's one thing when you have an idea about something, and then it's another when it starts to pay off. And it's like Chevy has brought his love of MMA to us, and it's allowed me to have another outlet to talk about something else I love. And also Carney Losada, when we get him on those rare times too. And it's nice to have like this different kind of thing we're consistently put out there, and we're getting some fun feedback from some people too. And I hope that continues to grow. I hope maybe we get some interviews with that, and that leads to something. I just want these adventures to kind of lead into, comedy shows, MMA interviews, maybe wrestling commentary, and maybe eventually, maybe we land something big with a company like an Impact or an MLW, or, maybe we hit it off with putting on a big comedy show. I don't know, man, but I guess my aspirations are all across the board. But
I would say definitely hosting the live comedy show, promoting it, I guess, like setting it up, that would be a huge thing.
And shout out to AJ too, because this is where he can excel. MC, and he's already had success and MC'd some comedy shows. He's pretty good at being the MC, and this could be something where, where he's going to be shine.
Yeah. Now, any dream guest left? I feel like a lot of the big names that we've wanted to get, we have gotten.
I mean, I guess when you say dream guest, I guess you mean somewhat realistic too. Like, I'm not getting Vince McMahon tomorrow. Like,
no.
You know what I mean? Right.
Yeah. Like, God, if I had to sit down and think about it for a second.
Tommy Dreamer would be one right now.
Tommy Dreamer would be a big one. Mm-hmm. I personally would like to get Mike Lawrence from the Wrestle Roast podcast.
I don't know if he's conceivable, but we had his brother Ross. I'd love to get Brett. Like if
Brett,
like this is
God, even if we got Bruce Hart, that would be like a wild interview, but that would still be good.
Yeah. And Gary Albright unfortunately passed away. Shout out to Gary Albright and his family, who I messaged about doing an interview, but then forgot he had died 7 years ago. That happens, folks. That's a real story. Shout out to his fan page for letting me know there was just a fan page.
Eddie Kingston, I think, would be a fun one.
Oh, Eddie would. Homicide. Yeah. Shout out to that was great, by the way. I don't, you had such a busy weekend last weekend. I'm assuming you at least read about your Homicide showed up at the end of AEW on Rampage.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yeah, it was pretty cool just to see those guys in New York. Eddie, I watched on Dark Elevation last night. You could tell was emotional doing commentary. Like in the beginning, you could see he was trying to fight it. And I know Tony Schiavone talked about it on this podcast that, Eddie was definitely emotional and super cool. Happy for those guys. I'm going off on a tangent, but yeah.
When I was actually at GCW on Friday night, I told Scott that I thought I saw Santana at the kind of the control board up there watching the Homicide Suzuki fight. So that was just interesting. If we could get Santana and Ortiz, that'd be another awesome.
Oh, that'd be amazing. Let's just talk about some women too, I guess, while we're at it. Maybe somebody like Alundra Blaze, Medusa Miceli there, like who's not currently in a major organization, but she's a legend, Yeah.
And, we've tried Thunder Rosa before, I believe.
Close, yeah. And she was always one thing I'll say about Rosa, where some people kind of just end up giving you this and this. Rosa was extremely busy, but was very honest all the way, and had communicated with us a lot. So,
yeah, not all interviews work out, but not all people that don't get interviewed were dicks about it. Sometimes
no,
you just can't make it work.
yeah, very upfront, very straightforward with her. So I always appreciated that about her. You know, who would be one I like, and I've tried, but I just haven't been able to contact him. Dutch Mantel.
Ooh, that would be a good
All
one.
his years promoting in like Puerto Rico, in the Memphis territory, the guys he's worked with as a promoter, but also wrestled. But you know, guys like Steve Austin and Undertaker. Oh my God, like Dirty Dutch Mantel probably has stories for days.
Oh yeah, he's got 2 books worth of them.
Jim Cornette.
Ooh, corny. Yeah, that would be a big interview.
Yeah.
Now, if you could add any new segment to the show that you wanted, what would you develop?
That's a tough one. I think that if I had my way, I don't know if it'd be a new segment, and maybe it wouldn't be like I think I'd like just to do another, like maybe it could be like a once a month thing where we just riffed and we just go off on particular subjects, or maybe it could be a random thing, you know, like maybe like AJ talked about doing like restaurants and stuff like that, going to restaurants and trying different food sometimes. Maybe going to a barbecue place and talking about how good this barbecue is or how bad it is. No, I'm not trying to rip off Dave.
That's when we're going to start sitting at the table going, Reg! Reg!
But it doesn't have to be that. It could be like, you know, just going maybe to a bar and talking about this, or maybe just talking about, you know, random stuff going on in our lives. Maybe helping people. Maybe there'll be a thing where, you know, maybe we'll have like a counselor on the show or somebody who actually legit helps people sometimes. Maybe taking a more serious tone sometimes. So I don't know about
be something different for us.
Yeah, it would be. I don't know about like, so a weekly segment is kind of tough. The only thing that it wouldn't possibly be weekly, but maybe a new segment we could do that I have interest in doing. But I don't know who would have the same passion for. I'd love to maybe do like a Marvel thing. You know, I love all the Marvel stuff that's been coming in, like the What If series. I've been watching all the little animation stuff, and they're actually, I just watched the latest one this morning, and they're connecting some of them together now a little bit. And
that's what I heard, that coming up near the end of the season, they were going to kind of have those different characters appear together.
And that seems to be what's happening. I just watched the latest one, but no spoilers. But yeah, pretty cool.
Now, over the last 2 years, what skills do you think you've improved in yourself?
Even though it's funny. We joke. I'm teased about this a lot. I'm totally cool with it. But obviously, I do not enunciate very well. Joe knows that. He didn't know the story, but I lost my speech when I was like 3 years old.
It's a lot less funny after this explanation.
Yeah, violent colitis and couldn't talk. I don't even know if I told you all that, but like, yeah, my parents, like some of the people, doctors and stuff, wanted to like institutionalize me. They want to put me like with autistic kids and like have me go somewhere where, you know, I would just be hanging out with autistic kids all day, can't talk. And it was my dad.
Isn't that something that your dad said? Like, he's not.
He's not autistic. He used to be able to talk. He just stopped. So it doesn't make sense. And they tried to tell him that he was emotionally connected and he wasn't seeing what was going on, which my dad was
emotionally connected to his son. What a fuck.
Yeah. They said that, now let me word that a little better. They basically thought that he was delusional, you know, that he was seeing what he wanted to see. And he didn't. My dad's not. For my dad, when he was alive, he was just not that guy. Like he was you know,
military man. So
he was a military man. He went to war in Korea and Vietnam. So this guy wasn't just remembering things, you know. But to get back to what you're saying, we drifted off a bit there. So I don't always enunciate things. So my communication is somewhat of a struggle, but at the same time, I'm also pretty good at it. Like I'm really good at starting conversations with people. I'm really good at like talking to people and getting a back and forth with people.
It's just when you hit that odd word that it's like, is that how it said, Dave? Or like you hear him say a last name and you're like, what's that last name again?
Yeah, it really becomes prominent on the Combat Cast when we have all these different fighters from like Brazil and China and stuff, and it's like, shit.
I mean, to be fair, I was making fun of Dave Matthews this weekend, and because for a guy that's on stage as much as he is, the guy can't talk for shit. And I made fun of him. Like, look at him, he can't even pronunciate his words. So I almost feel like I pulled the Dave at that point. Like, I'm creating new words.
You know what's funny about that? I would say, just to say one more thing about this, though. I think what I do well, and it's improved, is that having these conversations is I generally am enthusiastic to talk to these people a lot of times.
Yes.
And I think that helps. And I think it's just continuing to develop that skill. And it's all, talking is so huge, people. I would say, and not to be an old fart yelling in the clouds, but in a society now where, and you can't help it. So I don't think this is really a bad thing, but, I don't think it's like people like to say this because kids are lazy. No, they're not. It's just like you're growing up in a very social media world, and everything is done online a lot. So talking and communication skills are naturally going to drop a little bit. Other things are going to get better, but talking is still such a huge, important thing that you can always work on it. You can always get better at it, and I think that's one thing the podcast does. It helps us get these reps of communicating and talking to different people and meeting different people. And sometimes you get thrown curveball too, folks.
And fuck us for not bringing this guy's name up earlier, but George South, the connection we made with him, the multiple great conversations. And that's one of those things where that was just an interview that I'm not going to say we're friends with him, but he's definitely been amazing to us, more amazing than any guest should. And that's, I think, one of the places where we realized you make these connections, you make this networking, and you do develop these kind of interactions with these guys.
Absolutely. Yeah, I miss George. I might have to get him again in the future. But me and George have talked so much about everything. I almost feel like we're going to need a specific title to talk about, because George is just always, unless George's got a new project coming out, I'll have to keep my eye out. You never know that guy.
Now, it's going to be a little unfair to do this, but top 5 guests so far. And this is not saying that the guests that don't make this list aren't good, because anybody we've had on the show, we've wanted to have on this show, we've enjoyed having on this show. But when you've had over 30 some odd guests, I would say, maybe.
Yeah.
What are the top 5 that stand out for you?
Okay, top 3 right away. I can tell you, I can give you the reasons why. Al Snow, in no particular order, but Al Snow, because he was the first big name we got. George South, because he was just the most personable guy we got, and he was just super great. I'm gonna have to add. Oh God, I just had his name. The Von Erichs, Ross and Marshall, just because that was a real mark out kind of moment for me. And then I'm going to include this guy because he was nice enough to give us a second interview, and he was super personable as well. Bobby Blaze. Bobby Blaze. So he's going to include number 4. I want to say, by the way, I'm not putting any ladies on here because I've had a lot of good lady interviews, but it's just, I haven't had that perfect women's wrestling interview yet where like they're going to crack my top 5 yet. So number 5, because in my head, like, I'm going back and forth on a couple guys. Nikita Koloff is one guy that I kind of think could crack my top 5. I'm probably forgetting somebody, but in this moment, Nikita, I lean towards him a little bit more than Ricky, because I had a cold that day when I talked to Ricky, and I was kind of hurting. But yeah, Nikita might be number 5.
God, if I had to give you top 5, I'm going to say Dan St. Germain, just because that felt like a bigger modern guest to get. Ricky Morton was huge. Jay Freddy, when we got him.
Oh, yeah.
I was super excited for that one.
He's good.
Richard Holiday, I think, was one of our more polished interviews where, remember when we had him do the sound drop and we thought he had fucked it up halfway through because we were having a lot of people fuck up sound drops, and then he brought it back around, and I'm like, this son of a bitch.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing.
That was great. So that's what, 3?
Yeah. So Jermaine, Holiday, Jay Freddy. Yep.
Jay Freddy, Ricky Morton. That's 4.
Yep. You said Morton.
And I got to give it to George South. It was just so fun listening to him. And I feel like that guy could talk for days. So I would have to give that 5.
2 other good guests, too, real quick to mention. Dale Wilkes, I thought, did a solid job. Had some interesting stories.
Oh, wow. We have had a guest that died. Shit.
Yeah, the Patriot.
Somebody asked me that last night at work, and I said I didn't think so.
Yeah, the Patriot, Dale Wilkes. And then also now the NWA heavyweight champion, Trevor Morrow, had some great stories, too, about almost getting into a fight with Road Dogg and Billy Gunn and some of the other stuff they had to talk about. It was pretty cool. Or it was when Bruce Pritchard tried to tell him that John Cena was an actual thug. I just love his honesty. Like, he didn't necessarily shut up people, but he didn't shy away from anything either. He just told it like what it was. So.
Think about the champions we've had on. Ricky Morton was a tag champion when we had him on. We had Trevor Murdoch before he was a champion.
So, story real quick, too, because I don't know if you've seen it on one of the NWA episodes recently in the last few weeks, but Trevor Murdoch and Nick Aldis go back and forth. And Aldis talks about a story where, like, because of Harley, he said, and, he was there with Billy Corgan, and they were at Harley's funeral, and they went up to Trevor because they're like, why are you not doing this? You need to be here. And we got a thing, cooking up with the NWA, and you should be here. And it's funny because Trevor told that story to us before he was ever NWA champion. That is on the interview. And I heard that. That was kind of a mark out moment. I can't believe I didn't tell you until now, but that was a mark out moment because I'm like, holy shit, that's right. That did happen. And Trevor talked about that. He talked about it on our podcast. So that's pretty cool.
That is pretty wild. Now, what do you think are some of the better ideas we've come up with in the last 2 years for the podcast?
I mean, right off the bat, the 5-3-1. I had a top 5 list. You called it the 5-3-1. And I had an idea. You improved on it. And I mean that in sincerity because I like the name, the 5-3-1. I think it's fucking catchy. And I think it's the segment that, besides becoming our signature segment, it's the one that creates the most debate and the most fun. Maybe, as far as a weekly segment goes, it's funny. We're not a news site, right? We got told that earlier because, our episodes tape a little later. But maybe for a new segment, by the way, as we're just, ideas cooking. How about top 5 of the week? That might be an interesting thing to do. There's so much wrestling going on right now. I don't think
we could probably throw that in the live show, and that's a way to keep it because our issue was when we would do news, it would come out a week later because, we release on Thursdays, we record.
It is me and you. It is me and you this week on the live show. So there you go.
I forgot about that.
Stiffed him.
We can always debut it then.
Yeah, I potatoed him a little bit there.
So guys, when you tune in this Saturday, shit, might have some top 5 of the week for you. That might be a good thing to end the show on because usually we'll end on like what we're most looking forward to that week.
Mm-hmm.
I like that idea. Now, I think getting shirts has kind of been an up in the air idea. Like we've sold a couple, but we are getting merch and trying to get it out there to people. So it is a step.
Damn right. No, that's a good idea. As far as other segments, I mean, just ideas we've had. I think this potential doing a comedy show could be a really big one.
Yeah, that's the good term of an idea right now.
Yeah, and AJ, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt, brother. I know you're not going to be here this week, but I believe you're going to come back next week, and we're going to fucking get this done, and you're going to be a part of this, and this is where you're going to come through. It's the fucking comedy. We're going to book a fucking venue, and we're going to get this fucking show on the road.
I think that's where AJ's strikes are going to be.
And I hope
Andrew like he's that dude that fucking quit on us at work.
Andrew, come on back, baby. We love you. Daddy loves you.
I forgot to add what segments I would like to do. I have gotten some UFC files, so I would like to maybe review UFC shows. You're going to see in the video that I'm going to include on the video version of this podcast that I've got a DVD collection that's a little wild right now and reviewing wrestling documentaries, reviewing old shows, kind of trying to do that to add a different element to our podcast. We're going to have a little more time in the winter here, so trying to develop those segments will be good. Now, on the flip side of our best idea, would have been some of our worst ideas.
Interesting. I don't live in the negativity too much, as you well know.
No,
too.
it's not something we try and do often on this podcast.
Yeah.
You can go anywhere on the internet and find negative. We always try and put the positive spin on it, but I was writing up these questions in bed, and one of the things is like, you think of your best idea, you're like, oh shit, what are some ideas that haven't worked? And honestly, I think any of our ideas that haven't worked haven't made it to air.
Right.
Or they died within those first 10 episodes.
Yeah, there was the best P thing we kept reoccurring on the joke that maybe was not good. Maybe it wasn't the best idea for branching out in terms.
Oh yeah, you're not gonna get female guests when you're talking where the good pussy's at. That has got to die. That was something that's one of those things that made us laugh in the moment.
Yeah,
and then of course I kept bringing it up because it's just funny to do that, but.
I think you're trolling AJ a little bit too.
Yeah. But it's one of those things you're not going to build up.
Isn't that funny that AJ was the voice of reason for us on that one, though?
Yeah, that was maybe the only time.
Yeah. Shout out to AJ. Hey, so yeah, no, because like, I mean, we could say that the PW Insider, especially for me, because I bought it, was like the work, because I wasted a lot of money on that. I wasted probably, but I'm not in the hole or anything, and I learned from that. So that's the thing. That's where like I don't really. It's not all bad. Like it was kind of cool seeing our stuff on our wrestling website, and also like I learned like, oh, okay, like this might not be the best way to get views, and I think people do. They can make that work, but you almost have to have a lot of money going into that because you're consistently buying and buying and buying all the time. So
now, no offense to AJ or Sheaf, but I think one of our worst ideas has been assuming people are gonna be there because they say they want to be a part of the podcast. And we're like with Sheaf, I thought he was gonna be killer on our social media. But you have to realize that there's gonna be times where people aren't as dedicated to your vision as you are.
Well, there's another guy too. Used to be in your meat department too. Does jiu-jitsu.
Oh yeah, Nolan. He cut our promos there for a little bit, and it's no fault of anyone else. I mean, I think we have a little harder time with AJ just because we started with him. So it's like, if you're going to be a part of it, you either are or aren't.
Right. But with Sheaf, he hangs on. So it's like he's never completely where it's like Sheaf is like, okay, we've already lost him. We've lost Nolan. You know what I mean? So,
and that's fine because I mean, we're only dedicated to this because we started it and we wanted to outsource some help because
we want it. I mean, that's the thing too. Like, I'm not trying to get you off, but we want it a little more. No offense to those guys. That's fine. Maybe they want something else, and there's nothing wrong with that. But like, we want this. We want this to take off or to branch into something else. And
I think that's where Chevy comes in to spin it back into a positive. Is I think he's one of those guys that we're bringing on that hopefully we can learn to navigate the seas with him a little bit more because I think it's easy to have two of us, but if there's three, we could get a little more social media interaction. The YouTube could be posted to a little more regular, like little things like that.
Yeah, no. Chevy could definitely be a big help to us, and I think we both know that. It's just executing that plan and getting together, which we're getting together soon. So maybe there'll be more Chevy in the future. But I was going to say, you took the words out of my mouth. That was one thing. Getting back to Chevy, what a pleasant surprise he's been, because it's not that I didn't expect him to work out, but when you see it work out, especially too, like I wasn't even, because I don't hang out in the negativity. I didn't think about Sheaf or Nolan when we were doing this, but yeah, that's a great example of like, oh, okay. Sometimes guys do this for a week or two and like, I don't really want to do this. And Chevy, we're already about, we're in the teens. I'd have to look at it, but we're already put some episodes in there. So,
and we're still friends with everybody involved. So, if he hears this, I don't want him to think it's a slight on him. Nolan's gonna think it's a slight either way. But We still love you, bud.
Yeah.
It's really just the dedication to it and
wanting it. Yeah, just wanting it.
Now, you brought it up earlier. One of the things that's happened to us over the last year has been the podcast network. What are your thoughts on being on a podcast network and how it's been?
It's not.
It's been a roller coaster a little bit.
We'll get the negatives out of the way first. It's not gonna you're not getting on a network and you're not just gonna skyrocket to the moon. Not that I thought that, but it is what it is. It's almost like the thing about that's kind of nice about the podcast network is that it's given us an avenue to do a live show, interact with people, and meet some people along the way. Some good people. Now, that being said, too, there was the initial incident with, the podcast was splitting off. The network was splitting off right when we got into the network, which was, I think, was All Everything Entertainment at the time.
Yeah, we started off All Everything Entertainment with Tim King. We did.
Who, by the way, who everybody had their problems with in the network. And, Jim was definitely a polarizing guy. You could probably see that. Everybody, but he was good to us. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he sought us out. He wanted us. We worked with him. And then we made the decision to go with Archie and people because it seemed like that was the way to go at the time. And I'm not regretting it, too, by the way. I don't want to wear it like that. But, like, it just was like we didn't know anybody. So we just made an instinct decision. And
we went with where everybody else kind of was deciding to go with that.
Yeah, and it was because we didn't know everybody. So to see everybody kind of go this way, and it was kind of the way it looked, the way Tim handled it to us. We weren't a big fan of the way Tim handled the departure. And that's not a knock. It is what it is. It wasn't for us. So we said, you know what?
I mean, I will knock him a little bit. He did say he said some shitty things about some people. Yeah. And the way.
Not to us, but to some people, yes.
Yeah, no, he was talking to us about other people. And the way he framed them.
Right.
I don't think it's how a leader does it.
Well, that's why ultimately why we did not end up going in that direction, because we had to make this instincts, and it was the way that was handled.
No, but shout out to Archie Spagnolo, Tyler Peters, Josh DeBoard, Chuck Winchester, his wife Danae. We had developed almost kind of a base level friendship with them at this time. Yeah. But now, I mean, we're not in the Slack chat. We don't talk all the time, but I mean, I'll talk to Tyler Peters fairly regularly. Archie, I talk with him at least once a week to set up the show. Chuck Winchester, I talked to him a lot, but I did drop some questions on him for just incredible. We have gained almost this little family, and it's almost like a camaraderie at this point rather than a jumping off point necessarily for the podcast.
Yeah, shout out to Josh DeBoard. Called me at 1:30 in the morning one time when he had some happy juice, said he just wanted to get together before a podcast. But it was fun. I was already up for my job anyway. So, but Josh is a cool guy too. Really his social media is pretty funny as well.
It sure is. Now, what has inspired you the most over the last couple of years?
Inspired. Good question.
See, for me, it's when we get those little bits of success, we get that interview and it does 40 views, which is low. Believe me, we know that, but you got to start somewhere and things like that. Or when somebody a Dan St. Germain will be yeah, I'll come on. That is all right, that gives me hope to reach out for more guests that I would like.
I'll tell you,
I would say just in general, I've been feeling better about life. When I left that job I hated, everything just kind of came around. So I get inspired by, Dave knows, usually when I first turn on this camera, I'm like, Dave, I'm not ready to do this today. But then by the end of the conversation, we're laughing and we're planning something for the future, and that helps.
The lady in my life recently remarked that I was telling her a story about Valentina Shevchenko, who's the UFC flyweight women's flyweight champ.
And she's like, Dave, you nailed that last name perfectly.
Yeah, I did. And she said that I was telling her because I think she likes empowered women. And the story was about Shevchenko, who is like a fantastic mixed martial artist. She's a UFC flyweight champion. She's dominant. Nobody touches her. She's technically sound. She's a Muay Thai champion as well, 17 times in that martial arts. Oh, by the way, she's also an excellent marksmith. Like she's great with the crossbow. She's great with guns. Like you see these videos of her like hitting targets all the time. She speaks several different languages. And oh, by the way, she's also like constantly working on dance routines and stuff like that. She's a great dancer. And I'm just like, man, like what a fucking cool thing to be so well versed in so a variety of different things. And the lady monster, she was remarking how I really enjoy those stories, and you know, like people like that inspire me. But to piggyback, because like you know, like Mike Verna, like you know, he's doing several different things, right? Acting, you know,
God, that's another guest we didn't bring up. That was another big one because he was a real good talker. He went for a while.
He did, and but just to piggyback off of what you said, like seeing people who get successful afterwards, how are we not going to include John Silver, the guy who was?
We got him just before AEW. Like,
yeah, he had done some enhancement work with them here and there, but it went from enhancement work to like now the guy is like a star in the Dark Order, and people react when he comes out to that ring.
And yeah, he was one of those guys that we got on the show that we've seen him at local shows and we thought he was good. So we had him on and he got so much better. How about getting on Amber Nova before she got on AEW?
Yep. Amber Nova's another one. We had Jazz on.
Shauna Reed, Jazz.
Shauna Reed, who recently did some AEW stuff again too. You know, yeah, I mean, like I said, I didn't put the ladies in top 5, but there's some good interviews with the women out there too right now.
And it's that we're getting them just before they're blowing up. That is kind of amazing to be on that ground level. Because when we started, the original name for the show was Indie Wrestling with an Edge. And early on, I tried covering so much indie wrestling because I figure if that's going to be your name, that's what you should do. But we talked a lot of WWE at the time.
Right.
Because, I mean, AEW was just starting. I think they had done their All Out, and then they did the Fight for the Fallen.
Right.
That AJ went down to.
They weren't even a weekly show at that time yet.
No, so we didn't talk enough indie wrestling, and now it's like, God, we talk so much wrestling in the average week.
Yeah, and it's just and that's where the 531 was kind of morphed because it was like we're not watching enough indie wrestling, but we don't want it to be like just a WWE podcast. And then it became, hey, what about top 5 greatest this, top 5 greatest that? Because nostalgia and like our history of wrestling and our past wrestling, where we draw from, you know, WWE at its height, but also WCW and ECW and these other great companies. It's like, oh, okay, this is where we could go. And that's kind of how that idea morphed too, just talking about that. So, yeah, not sure where I was really going with that, but just like that's a lot of, you know, how we ended up doing the 531 and all that too.
What has detracted you the most over the last couple of years? Like I said, we don't deal too much in the negativity, but for everything that's inspired us, there's been not as much that has held us back, but there's been a little bit.
Detracting. As far as just the podcast itself goes?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to know what's holding you back in your life, brother. We don't need to expose your demons here.
No, but I mean, you know, work and everything like that can definitely hold you back from doing everything you can in the podcast.
Work schedules, definitely.
Right. Yeah. So that can be a detractor.
I think at times feeling that we couldn't get somebody for an interview, so it's almost like we don't try. That hasn't been too many people, but I'm sure that we felt like, oh God, they feel a little above us at the moment. So
yeah, and I mean sometimes these people are just busy and they don't want to deal with a podcast interview.
Yeah.
Because they know they can do 1,000 other ones, you know, and then if they don't, so unless you're, you know, some valued name that, you know, is coming out there, you know, like you're from the Conrad Thompson podcast family, which they don't do a ton of interviews, but you know what I mean? Unless you're like, you know, really, really like a giant name, then these guys aren't going to necessarily have time. They might be busy, you know, but sometimes they do. And that's what's great. Tim Storm was another great example of a guy who just like to work with the fans and give back.
Isn't that wild? The deeper we go in this interview, we just keep uncovering more names. Like, oh, how'd we not mention this? How'd we not mention that? Now, Dave, we've been going for a little over an hour, so I've only got a couple more questions. And I'm going to start with the more broader one, and then we'll end on a more direct question. What do you hope for the future of the podcast? We kind of covered it earlier, but this is more like, what do you want to see us do? No time limit on
it. Yeah. So like I said earlier, branching off to do different things, putting on comedy shows, commentating, that all still stands. That can go with this as well. So, but just to make it a little different, I talked also about potential segments Marvel and barbecue and stuff like that. So yeah, just all of that. I want all of this to branch out into something from the podcast, and I want to add other segments. I want to meet more people. I want to go to things, and I want to develop more relationships with people.
I think if we could make somewhat of a living off this, that would be amazing.
Sorry, that's in my head. That's just an assumption. Yeah, if I could quit my job tomorrow and make enough living just to pay my bills, done. See ya. I'm out. I guess that would be the next goal. Is just try to get some compensation out of YouTube and stuff like that.
Yeah. So if you're watching this video, subscribe. Good place to put it. An hour 6 into the interview. I'm pretty sure people are still watching. Dave, I'm gonna end on a question that it occurs to me a lot when I'm sitting around. But do you like wrestling more or less after doing the podcast?
Good question. I don't think it's affected me too much, honestly, one way or the other. When I'm tired and I don't have things going on, or there's nothing really going on in wrestling, my fandom could wane a little bit. Never completely gone. But that being said, when things are hot in wrestling and there's not and I can manage my time, I love wrestling. So the podcast hasn't really affected that too much.
I only ask because I watch so much wrestling now that it's I almost feel like I don't watch enough of other stuff because I'm either catching up with an event that happened or watching something to talk about it on the show.
That's a fair point. It's interesting because this is a really good week for wrestling, right? After the Grand Slam and everything like that. So I've really enjoyed wrestling this week, and I have to put wrestling on almost in my car or my truck off to the side, which Scott teases me about all the time. Shout out to Scott from Voluntown, because he's this guy's gonna get into a fucking accident. But I want to make it clear, I'm not holding my phone up like this when I'm driving. I just have it off the side. It's just listening to the radio or something, Yeah. It's the only way I can really keep up with all these wrestling shows and still get up at the ridiculous time I have to get up in the morning. Now, that being said, I love this stuff. But to your point, when I start watching something like the What If thing from Marvel, man, I really just enjoy the shit out of that right now. Is that because it's not wrestling and it's something completely different? Maybe.
Have you watched the Vision series where it's different anime animators doing Star Wars?
No, I have not.
It's on Disney. It's amazing. I watched the first episode. The first one's really good. Second one, not as great, but I'm not a fan of anime, so
it's on Disney Plus.
It's on Disney Plus.
Okay, and it's called Vision.
I want to say it's called Visions. It's like a Star Wars anime thing.
All right, I'll check it out. We're only a couple episodes into.
Yeah, they have 8 episodes up there.
Okay.
I think they dropped it all at one time, but it's definitely worth checking out.
Interesting. All right.
Now, guys, you got a little more insight into the show. We want to shout out fans of the show: Randy Osga, Mike Flynn, Zach St. John, Jake St. John, author of Night Full of Diamonds, available on Amazon. Also, the namesake of the Jake Rule.
Yep.
Jesse from New Hampshire. Scott from Voluntown. Mike Caldwell. Jason Gross, who's always responding on Facebook.
Yeah.
Any name? You got any
Tyler
names?
Peters,
Tyler Peters, Josh
Winchester, yeah. AJ.
Friends in podcasting. Who's that?
AJ.
Oh, him too. Yeah. How do we forget about him?
Yeah, reoccurring role.
We
Hey,
just want to
shout out
thank
to
everybody that's listened or been involved
yeah.
because
So Chevy too, even though like because he's also listened and he's now involved. So definitely shout out to him. Oh, and my boy Pete. I don't know, he's been pretty busy lately, but he's checked out some YouTube videos. I've mentioned him here. Pete, shout out to you. Hope you appreciate you, man.
nice. Yeah, guys at work, Red, Mike Ladford, Dames checked out videos. Even Trevor's checked out some shit.
Shout out to Trevor. What up, Trevor?
Mm.
Oh man.
But yeah, it's been so much fun growing this over the last couple of years. And I don't know if we brought it up, but as we record this, this is the actual 2-year anniversary day that we released our first episode.
Yeah, and if anybody's listened to us talk for over an hour and really just enjoy us, shout out to you two. So you know what, you guys are the hardcore fans. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
if we left out any names, it's not for any type of spite. I mean, you heard the guests we listed. We didn't even remember all
We
of
got
them.
Tim Storm. What the fuck?
But guys, thank you very much for listening. And God, we hope to do it for another 2 years.
Yeah, and beyond.